I'm Zack. I'm here today with Ink Stories. A little bit about who we are. We're a local indie game developer here over in Dumbo in Brooklyn. We work across a wide range of media from graphic novels to documentaries and of course game development as well. Recently we've released our first game on Steam and iOS, 1979 Revolution Black Friday. The talk is going to be sort of centered around my process working on the cinematography for this game. So as a little introduction to get everybody on board, I'm going to show you guys one of our trailers.
We'll kill 100. Let's just get this over with.
Alright guys. So it is a narrative adventure game, so cinematography was extremely important to our process. A little bit about my background. I graduated from Pratt Institute with a degree in 3D animation and a minor in cinema studies, and I created a short film to graduate from there, and I've worked on various live action sets as well, but I've never had to really take on cinematography head on until starting with Ink Stories. In fact, probably one of the weakest aspects of my short was cinematography, and so this was a great learning experience along the way. So at the beginning of the process, as I mentioned, I was sort of rough around the edges. While I was familiar with all the techniques and the language of cinematography, I never had to really get behind the camera for an entire project, especially of this scale. Luckily, we were very clear in how we wanted to set out and film this game, and because of the time period that we were located in the 70s, we wanted to be very true to the sort of stylistic handlings of cinematography at that time. As it is digital cinematography, you can and are able to move the camera anywhere and animate it in any way, but it was really important to us to have that real world weight, that sort of human imperfection to the way the camera moves throughout the game. Also, in terms of the compositions of the shot, the way the camera moved and was set up, it was really important for us to be aligned with what was possible at that time. Down to the fact that even if we were having a more still shot, that we wanted to have some of the breadth of a human actually holding a camera and would be filming in that moment. So at this point in the process, we were working with, we had mocapped the entire game all the way through, and we were working with just basic generic characters on our rigs. We hadn't finished the models for the environments or the characters, so we really got started right away, and we're working with these sort of generic geometry set to the rigs in these pretty sandbox state environments as well. As you can see in this particular one, a lot of this was helped to set up the final geometry and finalize the environments and blocking for the game. So here, we started to get comfortable with the process, but we started to reach our first fallback. So what you're going to see here is side-by-side comparisons from my play blasts, which is just a quick render out of without actually any render information, and then the final shot from within the game at that point in the process. What we had come to find is that the scale of the rigs that we were using to set up all these shots, to frame everything and to animate all the cameras, was actually at a different scale to our final characters that were being worked on at the same time. So all the scenes that we had done up until this point had to be brought back and reworked with the cameras. What this did was make a lot of the shots unusable. For whatever framing and pacing the shots we had, it was kind of taken apart. One of the things that we also came against here in creating these side-by-sides to work back and forth with our developers, we noticed a few other issues we were having as well. So one of which is the difference between Maya and Unity's handling of cameras and sort of lenses in particular. So in Maya, it's using a focal length, sort of mimicking an actual lens within a camera, and Unity is using the FOV, or field of view. The problem with this is that they do not correlate directly, so we worked on some math to get the cameras to look right, so that the developers, going back and forth from me and them, we were making sure we're getting the right focal lengths, so this greatly changed the effects of the shots. What we actually ended up doing was through a lot of test and fail. There's some good math out there to try to get it right, but it never quite got there for us. So what we ended up doing is I stayed within a pretty consistent set of focal lengths and just created sort of a chart to directly interact with to make sure everything was right. We were really truly also editing this almost as if it was a live action film. And because of this, we were making sure that we were nearly frame by frame precise for some of these shots. In all reality, probably driving the developers a little crazy. So one of the ways we tried to fix this issue with the height was through the graph editor, which is just a visual graph representation of all the keyframes on the cameras, and hopefully sort of, across the board adjusting the shots in one fell swoop to try to get it right. In doing this, we realized that the only issue wasn't just the height. The characters' width they were much more full than the mocap rigs, and so what we were finding, it wasn't just an issue of height or head clipping when we were working through the shots, but that it was an issue of the entire composition being lost once we started to bring in the actual characters. Realizing this actually turned out to be, in a way, a blessing in disguise, as we had to, as terrible it is, we had to redo all the work we had done to this point, but realistically we were working much faster and we're able to take all that we had learned at that point and apply it to this conversion to the new characters. I had a professor in college who would always state after a crash, you always work twice as fast and twice as good. I found in this process that was rang very true. As we were finishing more and more scenes, our flow got tighter and tighter, and we actually started to alter our process a bit. So up until this point, we were really we had a very clear edit and shot in mind, sequence to sequence, of what we wanted for every action, every plot beat, and we were kind of approaching it in that way. Once we started to kind of reapproach this stuff because of the various character issues, we decided to try and open it up a bit. So I actually ended up getting a much wider coverage, trying to get several shots across the board, from wide shots, close-up shots, over-the-shoulder shots of all the main characters, and then some specific and maybe more experimental shots as well. So here what we started to do is blast these across the board. I would just get wide coverage of every scene, and then we would bring it into Premiere and use the multicam function to sort of create these tight edits. Once we kind of got feedback from this more cleaned up edit, I would go back into Maya and sort of perfect the individual shots and the keyframe ranges that we were working within. Up to this point, everything had been pretty one-to-one. When we shot the mocap for the game, we shot the entire scene start to finish with all the actors within the scene. What we started to approach at this point was scenes that we were starting to utilize our library of sort of generic mocap, from soldiers marching, crowd control, rioting, running, just all these generic actions that we're going to pull in from our mocap and sort of populate these large-scale riot and protest scenes. Chapters 5 and 16 in our game are what ended up being our largest scenes, utilizing the most of these characters. As you see here again, we're back to these the gray characters as the tertiary characters that were sort of used for these sequences were not completed yet, and a lot of this again was used to inform how this scene would be finally built in Unity and how the final geometry would play out. So a little bit this is a pretty early sequence in the process of one of the later scenes into the game. And so we're going to see what that looked like with these early characters, kind of stitching everything together. So throughout this process, the dope sheet really became my sort of main tool for dealing with all these animations, making sure that even though these were just short bursts of generic action, that all the clips played together and the action all made sense, and when all the characters were interacting with each other in these sort of larger scenes. From here, we started to hit our next big issue. So in this scene, chapter 11, we faced a new challenge in that this was sort of our largest scene and our most main characters interacting with each other all at once. The volume we recorded in for the mocap could only hold 5 actors at any time. And so this scene gets up to about 8 or 9 characters at one moment. And so we were unable to, what we had done previously, which was record the whole scene with all the actors in one shot. So what we had to do here is, this is sort of an accusatory scene where you're playing as the main character, Reza, and everyone's trying to accuse and sort of ganging up on you. And so what we had to do is we had to have a couple actors jump around in the sequence, kind of delivering lines for different characters, so we had it all collectively, and then we could use it for this scene. However, another issue we came up against is Naveed, the director for this, was standing in the group directing, and was he himself one of the characters delivering the lines as well. So we actually ended up not having mocap footage because he was standing in for that. So we sort of had to gather and repurpose footage we had used for other segments for this as well. Another big problem that we came across was that of course, the only scene in our most complicated scene with this many characters had corrupted data from the mocap. So the characters would be in the middle of an action or in the middle of delivering one of their lines, and the keyframes would totally break down and go for about 200 frames before they regained again. So to sort of wrangle in this process, we had a lot of back and forth with the developers, making spreadsheets, trying to check every movement, keyframes I was deleting, moving around, positional change, and all the camera information so we could pull it into Unity and get this scene to work. So this is a very early version of that scene. You can see some of the problems working here, how the characters sort of popping in and out, and you'll see sort of the action of how the actors had to take over multiple characters as well. guys. So to track all that, like I said, we had a lot of back and forth between the developers, and what we had to do was track literally every single positional change, keyframe change, so that I could feed this back to the animators so they could clean up the corrupted data. We could get it back into Unity and make sure that the positions of all the characters were correct, the cameras were working correctly, and that the edit was in line with what we recorded as well. This ended up being a multiple month process of back and forth trying to figure out the best way to get this achieved, and it ended up resulting in this piece right here. This is the final version of that scene in the game.
You're not going anywhere until
I was in the crowd with Bobak when Abbas was stabbed. Not on stage with all of
He
you.
must have been stabbed by one of the soldiers.
Have you seen the wound? Dirish, is that from a bayonet?
That's right. It came from a shearing knife from the bazaar.
Yossi, you were at the bazaar this morning.
How did I hurt Abbas?
We were all on stage, so that means we're all suspects.
Look, if you didn't do anything, you have nothing to worry about.
Whoever tried to kill Abbas will stop at nothing to destroy us. Start talking, Jaffa.
Enough! Saeed, bring me that book. Who's this, huh? Look familiar?
I don't know.
The name says Shiraz, right?
Yes, he's my brother, but that doesn't make him Sabah.
He's one of us. I know him. I can vouch for him.
Of course he can servant, boy. No,
Get enough. I'm no one's servant.
You probably helped
I'm
him.
getting BB.
He's a spy for the infidels.
Hey, it wasn't him. He didn't do
He
it.
needs to disappear now.
So, I'm Sabah. Now what?
Let's show you what we can traitors. You're a dead bag. Let's all of them now. This guy's a hawk. He's involved with whoever attacked Abbas.
So he stabs Abbas only to help him in the alleyway?
That's how these guys work. First they gain our trust, and then they deceive us. Take a look. You see? These pictures don't lie.
This is Hussein.
You know him?
Of course I know him, he's family.
What? Look down. Didn't I tell you?
Just because they're related, it doesn't mean he's a spy.
That's what I told them.
In any case, this is not a group decision. Reza, come with me. Let's go.
All right, guys. So throughout this process, we learned a lot about not just cinematography, but how to really manage this within Unity and within Maya. And again, since this was such a filmic game, especially for us, it was really key that we got a full cinematic quality within the camera work, and down to the mocap and the actors and everything included. The camera, as we know, has the ability to tell a large part of the story, and it can make you feel the wide range of emotions just as much as the dialogue and sound and music can as well. The world of virtual cameras, as I mentioned, lets you do really anything, but as we learned in this process, and what was really important to us was really to keep it within a realistic setting, and especially within the time period that we were working in. By sticking to a defined period-accurate rule set, we were able to make a game that was a very strong narratively driven experience, where these cameras played a big part. I know that cameras are often an overlooked aspect of game development, and I think more and more, especially as these narrative experiences become more integral to the plot lines of many of the games that are out there, that people start paying more attention to the cinematography and see it as a tool as anything else in both Unity and Maya. So thank you guys for having me today. I'm excited to take what cinematography means as we move into VR and really kind of experiment with what cinematography starts to mean in these VR experiences as well, where you can control some things, but really the player is able to look wherever. So thank you guys for having me today. We are going to be showing the game out in the center. Feel free to come by if you have any questions or want to check out the game, and enjoy the rest of today.